Alright, hello everybody, my name is Cameron Lasley, and today I'm going to be showing you all a tutorial for beginners in Adobe Lightroom. Now, if you've been using Lightroom for a while, you're probably most experienced with the things I'm going to show you today, but just in case you aren't, this is a live stream that I'm showing today in order to get you started on the right track with Adobe Lightroom and answer any questions that you might have about this program. Alright, so when you first open Lightroom, we've got Lightroom open here. We are going to make sure that we are in this library tab, and once we're here, we're going to see an option that says import. We're going to click import, and then we're going to choose where our photos are from. So where do we want to import the photos from? So for example, we're going to go to my main files drive here. I'm going to go under photos. I'm going to go to clients. And I'm just going to choose a random client that I'm going to be editing pictures for. Actually, we're not going to do this. We're going to use sports instead. We're going to do the latest game, all the original files, and press import. And Lightroom is going to sit here and automatically import all of the images. Now, you can choose where they import to, but just for this basic tutorial, I'm not going to worry about that. So you see, once they're all imported, they're going to show up in a minute. Sometimes they take a minute to load in. So once all the images are loaded in, it says it's complete. We're going to go here to where it says develop. And this is where all the photo editing takes place. Now, the first thing that I like to do when I'm taking pictures, especially in a fixed room like a gym with my sports photography, and I've got the exact same setup for all the photos, I like to create a preset. Now, Adobe Lightroom has some presets built in right here. These are my presets right here. But you can see all these Lightroom BW presets, Lightroom color presets. You can do all sorts of stuff with them. So what I like to do is, since all images are going to be essentially the same, I like to go ahead and set a preset. We're going to continue on here. So we're going to go ahead and set this white balance to 0. Okay. Now, I notice the image does look a little bit warm, so we're going to take this down to about 5500. And I think that looks good right there for the type of photos that we're doing. Now, in camera, I set contrast down so I can add contrast in post and get a little bit more dynamic range out of my images. So we're just going to do an increase in contrast here, about a 40 increase in contrast. Since I use speedlights for sports, I'm going to take my highlights down about 30, increase my shadows to bring out the shadow details, and reduce my blacks so I maintain contrast. And then add a little clarity just for effect. And for ruggedness, always decrease the vibrancy just a little bit. Now, there's many other options here that you can use as well, but these are more advanced features right here that we're not necessarily going to get into in this video. Now, these are shot in the Nikon NEF RAW format. So this is a RAW image. You see this .NEF file here? That's Nikon RAW. So the image is quite large in size. So what I always like to do for lens corrections, I always enable profile corrections to fix any vignettes or distortion issues and remove chromatic aberration. Now, what chromatic aberration is fringing, and that's basically when you can see red lines or green lines or blue lines in the image. It's usually a blue or red, but it also depends on the lens and the colors that you are shooting. Everything else looks good for this image, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over here to where it says presets. We're going to click the plus sign, and we're going to name this preset. We're going to name this one just for the purpose of this tutorial. We're going to name this one tutorial preset because I already have my presets for this location. So I don't want to interfere with those presets any. Make sure all of our settings are correct, which is with what we want. These should not be enabled. They are enabled for some reason. And I think that's good. So we're just going to click create. Now let's say we want to apply these to all of the images in this film strip or this import session. We're going to go back to Library, and we're going to press Control A on our keyboard. And what Control A does is selects all the images in the current selection, or the previous import rather. So now what we can do, once all the images are selected, we can go over here to where it says Saved Preset. We can scroll down to User Presets and find the preset that we just created. And what Lightroom will do is it will apply that preset to every single image in this import. Then all we have to do is go back to Develop, and all of our images will have that effect. And we're going to deselect the images. So once we're back here, like I was saying, now we can continue our editing process. And you'll see this image hasn't changed because that's the preset that was used. Now, of course, each image is going to be slightly different in color because since I use speedlights, my speedlights don't always reach to the end of the gem. Also, one thing I forgot. When you like an image, you can also press the numbers 1 through 5 on your keyboard to rate the image. I like culling this way, and basically culling is just selecting the images that you want for your final export. If there are images that you don't like, then you don't have to do anything, because what we can do later is we can go here to Filters, we can select Rated, and all the images that we like that have a rating on them will be selected. Then we can export from there. It makes things a lot simpler in the end. So this one I like right here, so we're going to press 5. Now this one I want to crop this one a little bit, so we're going to go here to Crop Overlay, and if we want to keep this, we can crop to several different types of aspect ratios here. So make sure that this is locked if you want to maintain the original aspect ratio, and we can just crop down and move it as we desire. Just like that. Now this one's a little bit dark, so we're going to just increase the exposure a little bit. And then we can play around with any of the other settings as we feel needed. And this will get it pretty close to the image that we desire. We move on to the next image that we like. Press the 5 button, and we can edit from there. Make any changes we need. Now something I am going to show you is a handy little tool called the adjustment brush. So basically when you click on the adjustment brush, it's going to bring up this little menu, and you notice when you go on the image, it brings up a little radial circle. From here we can select different settings that we want to change about an image. So for this one, his jersey seems a little bit brighter than the rest of them. So what we're going to do is we're just going to knock that exposure down a little bit, make sure nothing else has changed so we don't modify anything else, and just brush over it. Just like so. And from there we can also change the exposure, you see. Now what I always like to do to ensure that my lines or my strokes are in the correct position, I always take the exposure all the way down and make sure it's not in any areas that I don't want it to be. So if there's any areas that I don't want it to be in, all I'm going to do is hold down the Alt key on my keyboard and just drag around it. Now if you scroll down a little bit more in this menu, you have settings for your brush. So what we're going to do is we're going to take down the size of our brush a little bit since we're working in tight spaces. And what we can do is when we hold down the Alt key, that's going to remove that effect. You see that? So when we hold down Alt, we also get a menu option for that as well. So we're going to feather this a little bit less, and then go from there. And just make those touches up on the edge. And this will ensure a lot cleaner looking image. Just like that. Then we take our exposure back to where we want it to be. And there's our image. On to the next image. This one's a little overexposed, so all we're going to do is just take the exposure down, and boom, that one's good right there. That one looks good just as it is. Now, just to speed this up a little bit, we're going to go ahead and skip towards the end. So there's an image right here that I like. And that looks good out of camera, maybe just a little bit overexposed. So we're going to take our exposure down a little bit. Same thing with this one, it's a little bit overexposed. Take our exposure down a little bit, problem solved. I like this image, so I'm going to press the 5 button on the keyboard, and that's going to set the rating to 5. So now, let's say that we've edited all the images that we want to edit. What we're going to do is we're going to go here to where it says filter. And all the images that we put a 5-star rating on, when we go here and click rated, all those images will be there. Now, if you want to export all of these images, what you can do is press Control A, and that's going to select all of those images. From there, if you would like to export the images, we're going to go up here to File, Export, and this is going to bring up our export menu. So right here, we're going to choose where we want the photo to be exported to. So just for this example, we're going to export these to the desktop. We're going to create a new folder and name it whatever we'd like. Tutorial images is what we'll name this one. Double click that folder, click select folder, and then we're on to the next step. Now you can rename your files whenever you export them to whatever you'd like them to be. You can leave them as is and leave them at the original file name, or you can name them to basically whatever you'd like. There's a bunch of options built into Lightroom for sequencing options and general management for mass amounts of photos, but for this tutorial we don't need any of those features. So what we're going to do is we are just going to do custom name sequence so that we can put these in a sequence. We can name them whatever we'd like. And you'll notice for each image, it's going to put them in a sequence like I just said. So the first image would be tutorial 1, the second image would be tutorial 2, and so on. And you can select a start number as well. Now for video, we're not going to worry about the video tab because that has nothing that we need here in this tutorial. For file settings, we can choose how our images are exported. So just for general use and for web uploads, or basically anything else, we're just going to keep it as JPEG. You can choose the quality of your image, or you can set a file size limit. Usually when I'm uploading sports photos that are just used for web purposes, I always limit the file size to 2000 kilobytes, which is around 2 megabytes. This will save a lot of time when I'm uploading images to the internet. But for this purpose, we're just going to export the full quality image. Image sizing is usually something that isn't needed unless you're doing a lot of professional work, so I usually don't mess with that. Output sharpening, unless I'm printing really high-end photos, I don't worry about this either. Metadata is just one more thing you don't need to worry about. Lightroom takes care of that for you. And the thing that's most important to me is watermarking. You can select or design your own watermark. None of these will be here in your Lightroom. These are all my watermarks that I've made. To edit your own watermark, all you need to do is select that box and click Edit Watermarks, and you can basically choose whatever you'd like. You can do a text-based watermark that has this. You can move it around to different places, change the opacity of it, and move it around, change the size of it. Even you can change the shadows, or if you don't want a shadow at all, change the font size, how it's aligned, and the color of it, and so much more. You can also do a graphic text like I've done here. For this tutorial, we're just going to use the base watermark that I like to use for my images. Now, I've named this one LPBC because it stands for Lastly Photography for my sports images, bottom center. So when we go to edit this watermark, that's where it is. It's in the bottom of the image in the center. So we'll just click Done. And make sure that this is checkmark if you'd like to use watermark. If you don't want to use a watermark, just leave that box unchecked. Post-processing, this is something that you shouldn't mess with, or that you don't need to mess with, rather. Once the images are done exporting, you can tell Lightroom to open them up in File Explorer so you can see them. Open them in Photoshop to where you can directly edit them in Photoshop if you need to do any touch-ups, which is not applicable to our application. Or open in another application, which we don't need. So we're just going to leave it at do nothing. Once you have confirmed that all your settings are correct, we're going to click Export. And now what Lightroom's going to do is it's going to export these images with all the changes that we have made. And you can see the progress of it up in this bar up here. Okay, now our images are done exporting, so we can go see where our images were exported. We exported them to the desktop, and you see there's a folder called Tutorial Images. This is where our images are. And here's our edited images. Alright, so I think that's about to wrap up the tutorial for Lightroom. One other thing I'm going to touch base on is these things up here. I basically never use these, and for beginners, I don't think you will either. You see, I've never used this. It's showing me tips. A map is used for when you are geotagging images to where you can see where your images were taken. But my camera doesn't support geotagging, so this is not anything that I can use. You can also create a photo book out of it and publish it. And you can see I've never used this either because Lightroom is freezing up. So you can create your own photo books and things like that. You can create slideshows with videos. That's where the video tab comes in. You can also print the images directly from your printer or directly from your computer to your printer in any way that you'd like. And you can also do it via the web. You can also publish it to the web, rather. It'll export it in HTML format. Alright, so I think that's about it for this video. If you guys really enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. I believe that is pretty much all I can cover in the beginners class for Adobe Lightroom. If there's anything else you'd like to see in this tutorial, please be sure to leave a comment down in the description under the description below, or leave a comment on the video itself if it's posted anywhere else except YouTube. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope that you learned a lot from this tutorial.